Then we go to our last speaker of the day, who is also joining us via Teams. And he also covers a very interesting subject, very much related to some of the things we heard earlier, which is Stefan Gevaerts from Pionira. And I hope he is in. Should be. Because they are working on something I personally think is really interesting, ECMRs and how you could implement this. And then, Stefan, before I give you the floor, it'd be interesting to see your views or hear your views on how we could do such a thing in the inland waterway transport industry. Stefan, to you the floor. And maybe you can say a few words so we can already know if we hear you.
Just a minute.
He is there.
We hear you in the conference call, Stefan.
Okay, can you hear me now?
We hear you loud and clear.
Okay, good. Okay, just some technical problems. Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm Stefan Gevaerts from Pionira. Thank you for the opportunity to present our pilot that we have made during the 3-year FENIX initiative. I will share my screen for the presentation. Okay. So what we did in the FENIX initiative was, of course, the construction of the FENIX connector, but also a pilot around the multimodal transport of waste, and in particular, looking at the business to authority case using EFTI or the UNCFACT ECMR protocol. Okay, so first, who is Pionira? We're founded in 2014, and our core business is the dematerialization of paper freight documents. So we started with the CMR, the consignment node, so the ECMR. Further, a number of our customers said, okay, we also are in other sectors, we still have paper for when we need to transport waste, when dangerous goods, transport of soil, contaminated or non-contaminated, and so on. So we started developing a platform with the goal of dematerializing. I use the word dematerializing because, and you see on the slide also, we always say, okay, stop thinking documents, think about optimizing your processes. And I think in the previous presentation of Roland, he says data sharing, it's about the data. It's not about going paperless or because a lot of people thinking going paperless, digitalizing is, okay, generating another CMR. And in the case of maybe legal documents, creating a PDF with a digital signature, and that's it. No, you need to really look and start with the data. So that was our goal of Pionira, and today we offer a number of those documents, mainly for road transport, but I will soon also explain how we can use this in a multimodal context. Okay. Okay, we were consortium partner of the FENIX network. The FENIX network is a FENIX European Federated Network of Information Exchange in Transport and Logistics. So the goal there is to enable platforms that offer logistic services to communicate to each other. communicate to each other in a secure way by offering services to the companies that are connected to those platforms. And also in the presentation of Roland, he said, okay, what about the SMEs? If we're going to do data sharing, then you have to have the possibility for the SMEs to also get into that data sharing context to get the benefits from data sharing. And by using the FENIX network, you can, in a B2B context, link all those platforms and have the possibility for the consumers of those platforms, the customers of those platforms. So, for example, our customers from Pionira to also access the how do you say, the services that are provided by other FENIX network partners. And that can be calculation of estimated time of arrivals, route optimizations. For example, if you need to plan your route, taking into account that you're transporting dangerous goods and so on. So that's what the FENIX network is all about. Now, as a service provider, as a platform that offers services to your customers, you implement a FENIX connector. Now, I will briefly go into the FENIX connector itself without too much details, but what you will see is, if you look at, it's a federated network. So from the presentation from Roland around federation, what also comes into mind here is for example, federation. Federation is about trust. The network partners, they trust each other. So there we have the federated identity manager, which does facilitate the trust, the mutual authentication between the communication partners. We have the data exchange service or component, which will be used to securely transfer data between the FENIX partners, but also provide a kind of patterns like request response and publish subscribe patterns. Public subscribe patterns is very interesting. It's like a kind of you don't call us in the polling, but you have in polling systems, but we will call you when something happens. Okay, and then the third part, the third component is of course discoverability. Which are the partners in the FENIX network, which services do they provide, and so on. So it's a kind of grid. It's decentralized. So the only thing we know upfront about a FENIX partner is the endpoint where the FENIX partner is and the public key, for example. And then we can ask for the services via the broker, the catalog, all the information that is available there. Okay. So within the FENIX project, one of the use cases we as Pionira that was the multimodal transport of waste. What we wanted to do there is, of course, dematerialize the paper freight documents for waste transport in a multimodal context, and using the FENIX platform to exchange data. But also use FENIX not only in a B2B context, but in a business to authority context also, because the ECMR, the documents that Pionira dematerializes, we have a business to business, have a business to business character, but also a business to authority. character. So during road transport, for example, during the trip, there can be a road control. Authorities can ask the documents and so on. So we want to have a look on how can we, depending on the role of the authority, provide an API through the FENIX connector that can extract the necessary information that is necessary for the authority to do its control, extract it in a number of formats. We use a principle of content negotiation there, where the service that asks for the information can, for example, say, okay, I want this information to be provided in a certain format and for a certain type of control. Okay, what were the challenges we faced during the project? FT was still work in progress. What we saw, that was, for example, a number of, how you say, information about the waste transport document that we didn't find the fields, for example, in the FT dataset, things like that. Also involving key stakeholders was a challenge. Of course, you see the waste producer, waste processing plant, and the carriers were not such a problem to get them onboarded. But for example, the terminals, the barge operators, rail operators were a bit difficult. So I wished I met all of you three years ago when we started the FENIX project, and maybe we could have this pilot in another setting. Okay, so let's show us the pilot overview. The use case itself is a waste producer in Liège who produces waste which needs to be processed by a processing facility. The pre-haul is done by truck to a terminal in Grimbergen, then by barge to a terminal on Linkeroever in Antwerp, and then the last mile is performed again by truck to the waste processing facility. Our Ewastra platform has a number of possibilities where all the stakeholders in this transport can subscribe to various events that happen. So that means when, for example, the goods or the waste is loaded at the producer, an event is triggered on our platform, and we can notify all the parties that are connected to our platform. So here you see a number of events that are being notified to our platform. We mostly notify all the stakeholders here in this pilot. But if you see, for example, from a terminal in Grimbergen to our platform, there's only a notification of the truck driver stating that he has delivered, for example, the container with waste on the terminal. But we don't have, for example, an interaction with the terminal that says, okay, now the container has been loaded on the barge. We also don't have an interaction with the barge. I saw in the other presentation the barge called demo. If, for example, we could have an integration there, then, for example, that information of the consignment, the container with the waste, with the URL codes and all the necessary information that's legally mandatory could be provided there in that system also. And then, of course, through the FENIX connector, we, by means of the specific API we developed, we can inform the authorities via a pull request when they do their controls to deliver the extracts of the mandatory data that they need concerning the transport. So what were the operational benefits? Of course, from the previous slide, you can see that we have a sort of end-to-end visibility for the connected parties. So that means, for example, that by using the publish-subscribe mechanisms, that the carrier that does the last mile know when, for example, the container is dropped on the terminal, but we don't know, for example, that the container is unloaded from the barge on the terminal for the carrier to pick up. But for example, when the carrier for the last mile picks up the container, of course, because the waste processing facility is connected, they get a notification that the container has been picked up by the carrier. And so these are these real-time notifications by a FENIX public subscribe. Of course, you have better reliability and predictability. You can use these events to, for example, make sure that your planning for the processing of the waste is optimally done. Customer-centric notifications. These can be customers that using these notifications to inform their end users or end customers in a better way, and also reduce errors. I don't know if you know the ECMR when it is used, or the CMR when it is used in a multimodal context. If the goods are not, how do you say, distributed, so when, for example, the container is placed on another transport mode, or the container, the goods in itself are placed on the ECMR, or the consignment nodes, needs to travel with the goods. With paper, that gives sometimes a number of problems. Loss of paper documents for the last mile, the wrong documents that get delivered to the carrier at the last mile, or the wrong container delivered. So they picked up the wrong container, for example. They have the correct document, but they picked up the wrong container. Now, in our pilot, how did we present that information, that data set? That was done using the one app for authorities. So there we had a connection between our platform and the ECMR EFTI access point that is used by the one app for authorities. And so there, what were the possibilities for FENIX to business to authorities? We can use it as the connector as an access point for the FT nodes. We have the secure communication. We have the mutual trust between the parties. The FT, the broker itself from FENIX can be used by the FT nodes to discover all, for example, in the FENIX network, all the services that, how do you say, offer these services. So at an inspection, they can query, for example, by document number, and ask that query to all the FENIX enabled services, for example, that offer that possibility, or query by transport means identification number. Now, on the road, this is, of course, the the license plate of the truck, but for example, the identification number of a vessel could also be known to query, for example, all the necessary mandatory data for inspection for all the goods that are on a vessel, for example.
Stefan, can you come to an end? Can you round
And
up?
of course, to exchange the data, we use the UNCFACT ECMR and the EFTI waste shipping receive data sets.
Right. Exactly.
Okay,
right.
thank you for your attention. I hope I explained some of the data sharing concepts that we use within the FENIX network and
Thank
how
you.
they could be used, for example, in multimodal transport and also to interact with a number of the services you provide.
Thank you, Stefan. Well, small round of applause. Stefan, I saw in your visual that indeed the barge didn't exchange. It wasn't included in this virtual chain of information exchange. Didn't it have an identity? Couldn't you make an identity for it? Or was that not part of the focus or the scope of your project?
Sorry, I can't hear you. Can you repeat the question?
Okay. I'll try it one more time. You showed us a visual where you saw the entire chain exchanging information without the vessel. It didn't exchange. There wasn't an arrow there.
No.
Was it hard, or why was it? Couldn't you create an identity for the barge? Because you were talking about a federated identity manager.
Yeah. The only problem was that we didn't find a partner that was at that time. That's why I said if I had known some of you 3 years ago that then we would have that also. Could that be part of the pilot itself? Yeah.
Because I know of a project shift to water from which we did with Yves de Blic, where we also followed cargo on vessels. We actually followed and we took the vessel position in it. But that was already also a couple of years ago. Yeah. Anyway, thanks, Stefan. See you soon somewhere.